The alarm on the medical deck would not stop screaming, and neither would my daughter. I am Visari, ruler of the Thisk Hive Courts, and in that moment none of my titles meant anything at all. I was only a mother standing over a small trembling body that had not known real rest in 6 days, watching the last strength drain out of her like water through a cracked shell. Ithri was 4 cycles old, by our counting that made her barely past her naming day, still soft in her outer shell, still needing the warmth of a lamp at night, the way human infants need a blanket. She was heir to 17 court lines, and every one of those court lines would mean nothing if she did not survive the week. 6 days earlier, raiders had broken into our outpost at Vessa's Reach. I will not describe what she saw in that supply locker, only that a shape came through the door, wearing armor she had been taught since birth to fear, and a word was screamed that burned itself into her mind forever. Human. That single word had become a wall between my daughter and sleep, and every physician on this station had failed to tear it down. Her signs are dropping again, said Dr. Lang, our chief healer, without looking up from the monitor. His voice was flat, the way a person speaks when they are trying not to let panic bleed through. Heart rate climbing, memory lattice showing stress fractures. If she does not enter deep rest in the next 2 days, the damage may not reverse. I had heard this warning 3 times already, and each time it landed heavier than the last. Then give her something stronger, I said. Give her anything. We have given her everything, Lang said. Sedatives that would put a grown Tysk soldier into stillness for a full cycle did nothing but delay her waking by an hour. Her mind is not resisting exhaustion. It is resisting fear. You cannot drug away a nightmare that has become bigger than sleep itself. Ithri's small body arched on the medical nest, her limbs jerking, a thin cry breaking from her throat even though her eyes were half open and glassy with exhaustion. She was not fully awake and not fully asleep. She was trapped somewhere in between, reliving the same door opening again and again. I gathered her against me, the way I had 100 times in 6 days, and felt her heartbeat hammering far too fast for a child her size. I have you, I whispered in the old court tongue. I have you, little one. She did not hear me. She never did anymore. Her mind was somewhere else, somewhere with a doorway and a shape and a word that meant monster. The chamber doors opened, and Ambassador Daniel Hart stepped inside without asking permission, which under any other circumstance I would have considered an insult worthy of removal from the station. He was human, tall, with graying hair, and the kind of calm expression that made me distrust him even more, because grief does not usually leave room for calm. I heard the alert, he said. How long does she have? That is not a question you are permitted to ask, I snapped, though even as I said it I knew the sharpness in my voice came from fear, not authority. I am asking because I might be able to help, he said, and I need to know how much time we have before I tell you something you will not want to hear. I stared at him, my mandibles clicking with a fury I did not fully understand myself. Say it. There is a corpsman on my ship named Laura Bennett, he said. She has worked with frightened children her whole career, human children who survived things no child should survive. I want to bring her here. I want her to sit with your daughter. The chamber went silent except for the alarm and my daughter's ragged breathing. You want to bring a human into this room, I said slowly, when a human shape is the very thing tearing my daughter apart from the inside. I know that sounds impossible, Hart said, but hear me. Whoever wore that armor in the raid was not one of us. Your daughter does not know that yet, not with the part of her mind that is running this fear. But fear is not always defeated by explanation. Sometimes it is only defeated by proof, offered gently, again and again, until the mind finally believes what the eyes are seeing. And if you are wrong, I said, and the sight of a human sends her into a fit that stops her heart, what then? Hart did not flinch from the question, though I could see it cost him something to answer honestly. Then I will carry the weight of being wrong for the rest of my life, he said. But your daughter is already losing this fight without us. Doing nothing new is also a choice, Your Majesty. And right now it is the choice that is killing her. Dr. Lang's monitor let out a sharp warning tone, and Ithri's limbs jerked again, harder this time, her small claws scraping uselessly at the air, as if trying to push away a door that was not really there. I looked at my daughter's exhausted eyes, at the dull light fading behind them, and I made the hardest decision of my rule. Bring her, I said. But if this fails, Ambassador, I will hold you responsible for every second of pain it causes her. I accept that, he said, and left without another word. The next hour felt longer than the 6 days before it. I paced the length of the chamber while Lang monitored numbers that kept sliding in the wrong direction. Ithri drifted in and out of that terrible half-sleep, crying out twice more, each time calling a word that was not a name, only a sound of pure terror. When the door opened again, I turned with every instinct in my body ready to reject what walked through it. Laura Bennett was small for a human, barely taller than a half-grown Thisk drone, with soft brown hair tied back and quiet, steady eyes. She wore no armor, no weapon, nothing that resembled the shape from the supply locker. She stopped just inside the doorway and looked at me first, not at my daughter, as if asking permission with her whole body before taking another step. "I am not here to frighten her," she said quietly. "I would like your permission to sit beside her, nothing more, for as long as it takes." I searched her face for the calm cruelty I expected to find in a stranger claiming to help, and found none. Only patience, and something that looked almost like grief of her own, as if she had done this before and knew exactly what it might cost her to fail again. "Slowly," I said. "Every movement, slowly." She nodded, and knelt beside the medical nest, lowering herself the way a person lowers themselves near a wounded animal, giving Ithri every possible moment to see her coming. It was not enough. Of course it was not enough. Ithri's eyes focused for the first time in hours, locked onto the shape kneeling beside her, and she screamed. It was the worst sound I had heard from my daughter since the raid itself, raw and high and full of a fear too large for her small body to hold. I moved to pull Laura back, my hands already reaching, ready to end this before it caused more damage than it could ever repair. "Wait," Laura said, not to me, but to herself, her voice barely above a whisper, and she did not retreat. She stayed exactly where she was, low and still, her hands open and empty at her sides, and she began to speak in the softest tone I had ever heard from a member of her species. "You are safe," she said. "I am not going anywhere. I am not the one from that day. I am right here, and I am not moving, and you are safe." Ithri screamed again, weaker this time, her strength finally beginning to fail her after 6 days of borrowed energy. "I know you are tired," Laura said, still not moving closer, still keeping her voice low and even. "I know your body wants to rest and your mind will not let it. I am going to stay right here until it does." Dr. Lang caught my eye and gave the smallest shake of his head, warning me silently that Ithri's vital signs were dropping into a range that frightened even him. I felt my own heart pounding as hard as my daughter's, and every fiber of 17 court lines screamed at me to end this, to remove the human, to protect my child the only way I knew how. But some other part of me, some smaller and quieter part, remembered the words Ambassador Hart had said in the corridor. Doing nothing new is also a choice, and it is the choice that is killing her. I forced my hands to stay at my sides. Ithri's cries began to break apart into exhausted sobs, her small body finally running out of the strength fear had been borrowing from her for 6 days. Laura did not move an inch closer. She simply kept speaking in that same low, steady voice, the same words over and over, safe, and here, and not moving, until the words themselves became a kind of rhythm, almost like the old court songs my own mother used to hum to calm frightened younglings. And then, in a moment I will remember for the rest of my life, my daughter reached toward her. It was barely a movement, one small trembling hand lifting from the nest, fingers opening and closing on nothing, but it was enough. Laura's breath caught, and she glanced at me, silently asking the only question that mattered. I nodded, though every instinct in my body screamed against it. Laura leaned forward, slow as still water, and gathered my daughter into her arms. Ithri went rigid for one terrible heartbeat, and I thought we had lost everything in that single second. Then something in her small body seemed to break, not in fear this time but in release, and she collapsed against the human woman's chest, her cries fading into gasping, exhausted breaths. Laura held her the way I had seen human parents hold their own children in recordings brought to our archives long ago, close against her chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, rocking in a slow and steady rhythm timed, I realized with something between disbelief and awe, to the beat of her own heart. She began to hum, low and wordless, a sound with no meaning I could translate, and yet it carried something my own court songs had never quite managed to hold, a kind of certainty that said nothing bad is going to happen while I am here. Ithri's small claws, which had scraped uselessly at the air for 6 days, finally uncurled. Her breathing, ragged and desperate since the moment we brought her into this chamber, began to slow. Dr. Lang stared at his monitor and said nothing for a long moment, then finally spoke in a voice that shook slightly. "Her stress readings are falling," he said. "They are actually falling." I did not move. I did not speak. I stood frozen in the center of the chamber, watching a stranger from a species I had spent my whole life being taught to distrust hold my daughter with more gentleness than I had managed in 6 exhausting days of trying everything I knew. Ithri's eyes, which had been wide and glassy with terror only minutes before, began to grow heavy. She fought it at first, the way she had fought sleep since the raid, her small body jerking once, twice, as if some part of her still expected the nightmare to return the moment her eyes closed. But Laura did not stop humming, did not stop rocking, did not stop whispering that she was safe, and slowly, impossibly, my daughter's eyes closed and stayed closed. She slept. For a long moment none of us dared to breathe, as if the smallest sound might shatter whatever fragile peace had finally settled over her. Dr. Lang checked his monitor twice, then a third time, his voice cracking with something close to relief when he finally spoke. "She is in deep rest," he said. "Real deep rest. Her memory lattice is stabilizing." I felt something give way inside my own chest, a tension I had been carrying for 6 days finally loosening its grip, and I had to steady myself against the edge of the medical nest to keep from collapsing entirely. Laura did not move from where she sat, holding my sleeping daughter as carefully as if she were made of glass, her own eyes glistening with something that looked very much like relief of her own. "How did you know," I asked quietly, my voice barely steady, "that this would work?" She looked up at me, and for the first time since entering the chamber, I saw exhaustion in her own face, the kind that comes from carrying someone else's fear on your own shoulders. "I did not know," she said. "I hoped. Fear does not always listen to reason, Your Majesty. Sometimes it only listens to a heartbeat that refuses to run away." Ithri slept for 11 hours without waking once. I did not leave the chamber for a single moment of it, and neither did Laura, though I offered to have her relieved twice, and both times she quietly refused, saying only that she wanted to be there when Ithri opened her eyes again, so that the last thing she remembered before darkness was not the only thing she would remember when the light returned. When my daughter finally woke, she did not scream. She blinked slowly, looked up at the face still holding her, and instead of terror, I saw only confusion, and then, unbelievably, the faintest flicker of curiosity. "You stayed," Ithri whispered, her voice hoarse from 6 days of crying. "I said I would," Laura answered softly. I do not know what passed between them in that single exchange, some understanding too small for words and too large for me to fully grasp, but I watched my daughter's small hand reach out again, this time not trembling, and rest against the human woman's arm. In the days that followed, Ithri healed, not all at once, and not without setbacks, but steadily, the way a fractured shell mends itself in layers. She still woke sometimes in the grip of old fear, and on those nights it was not the court healers she called for, nor the ancient songs of her own people. She called for Laura, and every time, without hesitation, I let her. I have ruled 17 court lines for longer than most Thys queens before me, and I have made decisions that shaped the fates of thousands. But nothing taught me more than watching a single human woman kneel beside my frightened daughter and refuse to leave, even as fear itself screamed at her to go. I do not forgive the raiders who wore the shape of humans and left that fear behind them. I never will. But I have learned, in the hardest way a mother can learn anything, that a single terrible day does not define an entire people, and that sometimes the very thing your fear tells you to run from is the only thing capable of saving you from it. Ambassador Hart came to see me once more before his ship departed the station, and I met him not as a queen addressing a stranger, but as a mother who owed a debt she could never fully repay. "Thank you," I said, and the words felt small compared to what I meant by them. "Thank Laura," he said. "She is the one who stayed." "I intend to," I said, "for as long as she is willing to hear it." He smiled, the tired smile of a man who had gambled everything on a single act of trust and won, and left without another word. Ithri sleeps peacefully now, most nights without waking at all, but on the nights when the old fear returns, when the shape in the doorway rises again in her dreams, she no longer faces it alone. She reaches out, and somewhere, whether across a room or across the stars, a steady heartbeat answers her. And that, more than any court song or ancient remedy, is what finally taught my daughter how to sleep again.